Okay, welcome everyone. Let's get started with our panel on getting the critical mass of the age of the app, opportunities and challenges in global technology in Africa. My name is Martin Markovitz. I'm a professor here at Wharton. I lecture on political risk in emerging markets. I want to thank you all, welcome you all for being here. Thanks for attending this panel. We definitely look forward to an interesting and energetic discussion where we'll investigate how recent entrance into a new tech space are capitalizing on global telephone proliferation in Africa. Just a couple things before I turn it over to our panelists for short intros. I want to thank the organizers for having us here today, especially our panel coordinator, Ado. They've all done a terrific job. I'm going to let our panelists introduce themselves in a little bit more detail, but I just want to tell you who we have here today. To my immediate left, we have Michael Szymanski, who is the Director of Business Development for the Meltwater Entrepreneurial School of Technology. That's MEST. They run an incubator program in Accra, Ghana. To his left, we have John Gozier, founder and CEO of EAA and Africa. To his left, we have Chike Dogmuna, CEO of Fans Connect Online. And then on the far end of the panel there, we have Mr. Tasha Bama, who's a recruitment leader for IBM South Africa. So what we'll do next is I'll have our panelists maybe take about 5 minutes apiece to do a quick introduction of themselves, overview of the companies that they started, the markets they focus on, and how long they've been in operation, and so on. What I would like to do after they do their introductions is I want to open it up as quickly as possible for audience engagement if possible. But we'll do some framing for you. I have one question per panelist in 4 topical areas that I will get each of them to reflect on in turn. And of course, we'll ask the other panelists to chime in as they see fit. And then if you have questions, we'll open it up from there. Just a couple quick notes. I am newer to the technology sector. I started my training in it, I think, Thursday, thanks to our hour. I work on political and economic development from a social science perspective in West Africa, though I do have about 25 years on the continent, though only one bad memory in Lagos at the airport, so forgive me, Chike, if I mishandled your last name. I'm still working on it. But I do want to say, in doing my research for today, I was really fascinated and really humbled by the things that people on this panel have been doing, especially in the context of my years going back and forth to different parts of the continent. And I do have plenty of questions of my own after doing this research. I think we could keep busy. I told the gala tonight. But if you have questions, we'll go to yours first, and if not, we'll pick up with mine after that. So we'll start with quick introductions here to my left with Mr. Szymanski and MEST.
Okay. Is the microphone on? Maybe not.
I guess it's a small enough group that I can. So MEST started 6 years ago with a fundamental belief in African talent. Basically, our starting place was talent is spread equally across the globe, but access to opportunities aren't. And so we believe that if we can give bright young Africans access to the right, a bit of extra training, access to seed funding, and access to the right international networks and mentors, then they can compete globally for international markets and create also wonderful Pan-African businesses. So the MEST model, we have a 2-year training program. Each year we operate in Ghana. Each year we get about 1,000 applicants for 20 or 25 spots in our training program. During that training program, we recruit university graduates, and all of the graduates, they don't necessarily have a technical background or a business background. The idea is just sort of taking a look at raw talent, taking a look at entrepreneurial passion. During the training program, they learn technical skills, they learn business skills, they learn leadership and communication skills. And they form teams and come up with an idea and pitch to our seed fund. We've invested in 16 companies since we started Incubator 3 years ago, and we've had some of our companies pitch at TechCrunch Disrupt. Actually, one of our portfolio companies was the first African tech company to pitch at TechCrunch Disrupt in San Francisco, and they made the finals. And we recently had our first exit cleansing. So that's sort of our model in a nutshell.
Can you guys hear me? My role at Africa, I founded the company 6 years ago. We help companies enter Africa as a market, mostly technology companies. We help them do business, find talent in technical areas. And what we've done over the years is using the profits from that company, we've started to reinvest in young technical talent. So the thesis being, we can only employ so many, we can only help place so many into high value positions. So we've started to make investments, seed capital investments into these companies. And so similar to Michael and Mess, we feel that opportunity needs to be spread evenly across Africa. That includes access to education, access to capital, and access to networks, right? So we run a program called Apps for Africa that's got 11 active companies that's done really well. We actually just saw 2 of them at the World Bank yesterday, pitch at a competition there. And then myself, I have a background working as an entrepreneur myself. I've started a number of companies, mostly in the area of data and analytics, using predictive analytics to help organizations make better decisions in order to help people. So I worked with a company called Ushahidi that makes open source tools for disaster response, and more recently founded a company called D8A, or Data, that does this on a broader scale. So thank you.
Thank you. 3 years ago, we started a journey in Nigeria, which every day is evolving to be something bigger than what we actually intended to get involved with. We started 3 years ago with a clear understanding that the demography is skewing to between 15 years and 35 years. And that demography is the digital demography. And corporations are having a hard time connecting with that demography because they don't tend to use traditional media. You don't find them very easily on TV, on radio, and on print media. They are largely more involved with their mobile devices. So we decided to go into some sort of digital marketing activations 3 years ago. 1 year after that, Google came into Africa in 2011, and they were searching for the best Android developers within Africa. So they instituted a competition called Google Android Developers Challenge. And we looked at that competition and we thought that, hang on, we could actually do something in this area. But something just about the same time stood out for us. Google was trying to present data on what Africans are searching and what people outside Africa are trying to find out about Africa. And one of the things that stood out was movies, African movies. So it turned out that people are actually looking for information around African movies. And we asked ourselves at that point, how do people get, what's the solution? It turned out there was no clear-cut solution. Unlike here, where you have the IMDb that you can use to track what's going on in Hollywood. In Africa, we don't have any such thing. So we decided to build a product called Afrinoli. Afrinoli is a mobile application that allows you to actually watch African entertainment, both in terms of full movies, short films, music videos across Africa. So we built it for the competition. And for us, it was fun. You just find something and then we built it and then put it into the competition. And they won the competition. So when we got $25,000, the next question was, what are we going to do with this? Do we blow it? Or just go have a nice time, for some work done? Or do we just throw it back into this? So we decided to kind of test it to see how people are relating to Afrinoli. It turned out that people are actually excited about it. And we realized that, hang on, this is just not something for a competition, it's actually a product. So we decided to throw the $25,000 back into the product and then use it to do online advert and all that. And that's the beginning of a journey that have, in 18 months, become a digital solution to a $1 billion industry that is not structured. The African movie industry is a $1 billion industry. It has no structure, it has no system of knowing the next generation of filmmakers and having people integrated. So we're using Afrinoli since then to be able to kind of be the bridge, and I'll talk a lot more about that during the course of the question, but that's essentially who we are and what we're doing. Thank you.
Hello, everybody. Thank you for joining the panel this morning. So, as introduced, I'm responsible for recruitment for our IBM South African operations, and prior to that, I'd spent 14 years in the recruitment industry in South Africa. So, for a long time, really involved with something which I'm very, very passionate about. It's about skills and talent. And so now I find myself at a very intriguing, wonderful company that I'm just as passionate about, which is IBM. In the technology space, which I believe is one of the most exciting spaces to be operating in right now. IBM's been around for 102 years. We are operating in 170 countries. We have 435,000 employees across the globe. And we've actually been in Africa since the 1950s. And we are in over 50 cities across Africa. So really what we do is we provide technology solutions that include hardware, software, and services. And our priority markets include the financial sector, the telecoms industry, public sector, and oil and gas. So we are business to business. A lot of consumers may not know us, but pretty much everything that you may engage in with a transaction has got IBM technology behind it. So whether it's a financial transaction, you're working on the internet, you're making a phone call, there's some IBM technology behind it. And I think that we take pride because we've evolved over the past 102 years. We're quite strong in the market. And we go far beyond, just doing work with computers. We bring water to developing countries. We are championing efforts to combat climate change. We're helping traffic flow more freely. And we're developing cutting-edge intelligent buildings and helping consumers to get more out of mobile phones, and mobile technology. So that's really IBM in a nutshell.
Thank you, panelists. Can you hear me okay without the mic? I appreciate those introductions, and I appreciate you being brief. Of course, given our time constraints, they didn't do any of themselves justice in terms of the breadth of what they're doing. So just very quickly before I start asking a couple questions, Natasha's got 14 plus years in recruitment and dealing with talent management in all different types of sectors on the continent, and then now a year and a half she's expanded her talent outreach efforts more globally. So she really has some expertise across human resources, very broadly defined. Chike, he told you about this contest they won with Google with a $25,000 award. I believe it was the next year Afrinali sponsored a contest with $100,000 in prize money. So not only did they turn that money around and put it back into what they were doing, but they were paying it forward. And Afrinali is now at 3 million users, yep, rapidly going to 4 million. And the rate at which it's picking up users is accelerating exponentially every day. John, I told him last night at cocktail hour, I think, how many companies he started, how many apps he's developed, as long as he wouldn't ask me to understand differentiation. That's 7 or 8 that he's done so far. Michael, I actually have spent quite a bit of time in Ghana and in Accra doing lots of different type of work, and so when I was doing my diligence here, I could tell that there is a real energy, a real synergy around what they're doing. And I know from my own work in kind of political development in Ghana that the need is tremendous for what they're doing in terms of identifying and training new talent, not just with technological abilities, but also to marry that with business capacities to provide services that the African market, in any event, desperately needs. And I think you guys just graduated your 5th class this year, 2013. So kind of 4 broad question areas that we're looking to get into today for you guys as you think about your own questions. How easy is it to capitalize on this growth that we're seeing? How do we get to scale? And what role, if any, is there for outside help in helping create business models that are going to use this talent and this technology in positive ways? What enabling factors facilitate the transition of local applications from early adoption to critical mass of usage? What strategies have been employed to overcome existing barriers to growth, for example, around the payment issues, illiteracy, et cetera. And with smartphone penetration, we were talking about this in the hallway just a little bit before we walked in, still under 10% of the market, what strategies are OEMs adopting to gain mind share? And I want to give a quick nod to Owl on some of these questions too, because she's had years in the tech field herself. So I want to do one question per panelist to get started in each of 4 topical areas. Again, I'll ask for to balance your depth with some brevity, but for the other panelists, feel free to chime in as you see fit. Chike and Natasha met each other about 50 minutes ago, and within 10-15 minutes, I wished I'd had my phone recording because it was just so much synergy there between the conversation around tech. So for Michael and Mest, thinking here about balancing the African market and its needs versus global market needs. Ideas that target the African market might not have the same application globally. How would you assess the revenue and income possibilities for products targeted solely at the African consumer? At the Mest Incubator, is there a strategy to prioritizing prospective portfolio companies that takes this into account? Saya, for example, which hopefully you can talk a little bit more about, I found it to be based on a really brilliant, innovative, and much needed concept, is one of your portfolio companies, and it garnered significant publicity. The concept is clearly viable currently, and will likely be for some time, but as more and more African users transition to smartphones, it may become less so. Do you think Africa-focused products need to covet venture capital interest, and if so, how? And if not, why not?
Okay, I'll try to answer as many of those as possible. So from Mest's perspective, we about half of our portfolio companies focus on global markets, so Western markets. And that's sort of out of a fundamental belief that our entrepreneurs and entrepreneurs in Africa can compete globally. And so sort of to that fact, we have one of the world's largest data feed providers for small and medium-sized e-commerce companies as a portfolio company. They have a partnership deal with Amazon. They have over 13,000 small and medium-sized merchants that use their service to submit products and sell products online. And 95% of those merchants are in Western markets. But the other half of our portfolio is focused on Pan-African opportunities. And the reason I say Pan-African is, we think that the Ghanaian market is probably a bit too small. We want them to think much beyond Ghana, but Ghana is the testing point of our entrepreneurs with their applications. So is Africa an exciting market in itself? And are there enough revenue opportunities there? Yes, and it's becoming more and more exciting all the time. So you're seeing rapid population growth, projected to be 2 billion by 2040, 3 billion by 2060, and 4 billion by 2090, but who knows that far out. We're seeing a rising middle class, and we're also seeing a very brand conscious consumer, and I'll get to that point in a second. What are the needs, though? We're seeing this development of the feature phone market and the smartphone market, and the basic phones. Basic phones with no internet connectivity are drying up in the market. There's still a lot out there, but in terms of new phones coming to the market, there are very few. So we're seeing vast majority of mobile phones now are either feature phones that have access to the internet or smartphones. And smartphones are growing much more quickly than we ever expected. And I think a lot of that has to do with, with the Huawei's of the world bringing in very cheap devices that are very functional, working off of Android. So now you have a lot of consumers with access to great phones and great apps. There's still a huge opportunity in the feature phone market, particularly to set your brand. And to gain those users and those consumers before they have access to some of the other smartphone applications. And so, the idea with Saya is there's not a great chat application for those feature phone users. There's WhatsApp, but they're not very active in the lower-end feature phones. So say the strategy is capture the market at the feature phone level as well as develop smartphone applications. So all of our companies have smartphone strategies usually as well as feature phone strategies. I think what we're seeing is with feature phones are great for transactional applications. So the transfer of money, the transfer of basic messages. I think if you're looking to create an experience and you're selling an experience, then we're much more focused on smartphones. But when you're looking to transact, then a feature phone's good enough. And you're seeing mobile money blow up that way. But I would love to hear more about sort of your feature phone strategy as well. I think that kind of answers hopefully most of the questions.
Well, on the feature phone, smartphone balance, there are certain facts that are, we need to focus on right now. The cheapest smartphone is just about the same price as the most expensive feature phone. So people are actually beginning to make that decision to rather move to a cheaper smartphone than actually go to the highest feature phone. Second thing is that in the last 1 year, and probably this is going to continue for another 5 years, there's a lot of Chinese companies moving into Africa with Android devices. And they are pushing to get to sub $100, and we suspect that, just around probably the first quarter of next year, they will achieve that because the rate at which they are coming in. So there are lots of Android devices coming in and they're all aiming to the, lower end of the market. So in real terms, and then the other thing you find out is that the most young Africans of 15 to 35 years old, they are very much aspirational. So the speed with which they move from one device to the other, it's pretty high. Just something that, common with their peers. I've moved on to this, what's the latest? And then they keep moving on like that. So there's a huge migration going on, and it's obviously going to affect the adoption rate.
Thanks, Michael. So I want to move to impact versus profit maximization. And I'm going to come to you first, John, with this one. Highlighting one point of view in the current wave of tech startups is that too many entrepreneurs are focusing on anti-problem, which is to say that they are building applications that are nice to haves rather than using technology to tackle intransigent problems. Looking at your background, however, and what you've accomplished, I was impressed by how you seem to employ technology to be so innovative in addressing so many varied problems of complex social need. Do you think entrepreneurs can focus on social impact and still make a living? And if so, how? And again, I'm interested in this issue of scale, if we can get to there.
Yeah, that's a great question. So this question comes up a lot because in the African sector, you have so much philanthropic capital that is being used to achieve social good. And when you couple that with all these young entrepreneurs who are trying to build businesses, it can be kind of an interesting place, an interesting dynamic for them to have to deal with, where they need capital to start their ventures, but a lot of them don't realize how much is tied to free money, how not free it is to take a grant from the World Bank, State Department, et cetera, to pursue a project in the eyes of what they think social impact is going to look like. And it's not that that's bad, it's just that if you're trying to build a business, the incentives of building that company might not be aligned with what a VC is looking for, or what an investor is looking for. And so, through the Apps for Africa program that we've started, we deal with this issue a lot in that half of the companies that we funded are social entrepreneurs, they're social ventures. And the other half are businesses that are thinking about achieving social impact, but they're businesses. And so keeping those guys with the mindset that you're building a business and one of your Secondary benefits to the public, is to society. You can't undermine your business model by pursuing that. You want to actually accentuate your business model by pursuing both at the same time. And so I don't think that the incentives are misaligned anymore. I think that there are just different mechanisms of leveraging capital. So you find funds like Amidiar, which will fund businesses that have a social purpose, but that make money. Or vice versa, they make money, but they have some sort of social benefit to the public. And there's other funds. There's Good Capital. There's many others. In terms of building products, though, that solve specific problems for society and trying to make money through that, I think that's something that's still a bit of a trick in Africa. It can be difficult to capture, for lack of a better words, payment from the public, using mobile apps and things like this, because the mobile payment system, while prolific in many countries, in other countries is completely absent. So you build an app that solves a problem that works in Kenya. If you migrate to Mozambique, it's almost irrelevant. You have to think about the problems differently. And so one of the things that we're starting to invest in, one of the things that I do a lot and myself, is working with companies that are focused on data and capturing data, different types of data, so that organizations actually have access to using that data to then go on and solve the next tier of the problem. You mentioned the company that is offering e-commerce data to other companies. That's great. You're laying the foundation. Someone else comes and builds the next layer. You're capturing video information, about the African movie market and making that available through a social platform. Who knows what new opportunities come through that, and I'm sure that's why you launched your app competition. So I really think that one of the most untapped markets in the African space is working with data in different ways to create new value that doesn't currently exist.
Yeah, well, one of the things we've seen, maybe in the last basically 2 years that we've kind of dug deep and, working on the tech space in Africa is this. It's an open slate. There are loads of problems that needs to be solved. And sometimes it's not, I wouldn't advise anybody in Africa right now to just, try and position yourself as just trying to solve social problems. The truth is the skill set you're using to solve that social problem can also solve some other problems that can generate revenue, which you can apply back into what you're doing. And essentially that's what we're doing. We're a digital marketing company. Okay, so by the time we provide solutions for corporations, we are providing corporations solutions that are enabling them to engage with the youth, okay, digitally. And those solutions, they pay for it. Now we take that and put into R&D in what we're doing on Afrinoli, whilst we are building Afrinoli. That's essentially how we've grown. And one thing we found out is that each one you build properly, you can channel it into social impact if you actually understand the sector. And I'll give you a short example on that. When we started the Afrinoli short film competition, the aim was this. We realized that most people cannot watch an hour, 30 minutes or 2 hours movie on their mobile device, because of bandwidth and because of convenience and stuff like that. Things are evolving, so we thought that perhaps a short form content would be the best way to go. So we tried to look around and say, okay, who are those making short films? It turned out nobody was making short films as a business because you can't monetize it. So if you're not making it as a business, it means we can't have quality short films. So the only thing we need to do is to inject money, and that's when we introduced this competition and put down $100,000. Boom! Here comes submissions coming from diaspora. We have more submissions from America, Europe, even as far as Singapore. And we are wondering what's going on. It turned out that at least on a yearly basis, there are 100 to 200 African graduates of film schools in America and Europe. Some of them are your friends. And they are finished, they are looking for how to tell the African story, but they are too far and there's no structure that's allowing them to connect. So they saw the competition as a means to connect. The moment we saw that, we realized that, hang on, we're missing out something. Part of the challenge we're having in Africa is that they say the quality of the cinematography is not good, the storyline is not good, and it's a bit repetitive, and then, sometimes it's boring. But more people are consuming it though. So the next phase will be, how do we move from where we are to the next point? So the next phase is, let's see how we can bring in these well-skilled, developed Africans who have been trained and get them to tell the African story. So we started working on that, and the moment we finished the first edition of the short film competition, we found out that we filtered over 50 very good filmmakers. So we went to Ford Foundation and said, hang on, look, every year you inject money into Nigeria, funding different NGOs, they're working on different stuff, and at the end of the day, all you get is a pile of reports that only you and them read. Wouldn't it be nice if we take these reports, give it to these filmmakers, let them go through it, and then develop short films? And then we'll serve it through Afrinodi. And I said, no, we never even thought about that. It will have more impact, it will reach out more people, and then the communication will go in line with what the young people actually want to internalize. So 3 days ago, they approved $250,000 for that. And it wasn't part of our business plan. It wasn't part of our revenue model. This is just something that came out because it's going to drive social impact as soon as we put it together. And that's what I think it's open for Africa. There are lots of things that will impact socially that you may not actually see until you start doing what you're doing. The onus is for those of us who are working on it to then look at it and then see how we can bring solutions to different areas. And then whoever is involved will see it as a good solution.
If I can piggyback on that, that's a really nice distinction, which is creating the resource first and then leveraging social impact capital as a tool, as opposed to leveraging as the means to create your resource, are two very different things. And that's something that it's incredibly important to understand.
I think, in terms of possibly my own mantra and the IBM mantra, it's about, in Africa, it's all ecosystems based, right? So whether you are an institution or whether you are an entrepreneur, you are in that ecosystem, you've got to collaborate with lots of other partners, and you've got to do needs-based, demands-driven solutions. Yeah. And that really is what it is about. And I think the thing with entrepreneurs, specifically in Africa, having to engage in these opportunities and identifying them because they're within the ecosystem, they have the primary advantage because they know they're living in it. But over and above that, we have to ensure that we are creating an environment that's enabling entrepreneurs to actually survive in these ecosystems so that they can create these organizations and create more wealth around them. Yeah. And I think that specifically in South Africa, it's a challenge that we grapple with because with legislation, government, politics, etc., the question is, are we creating enough of that entrepreneurship? Because the conversation needs to be changed from how many jobs we're creating to how many entrepreneurs we're creating, because that's really what's going to drive GDP and drive growth. And I think absolutely Africa is made up of lots of different countries. I think we've all gotten past that point now where we plug Africa into one. But I think those synergies do exist with our other counterpart African countries.
I think that's a great place to pick up. If my memory serves, out of your film competition, GK, you've now gone on to develop a master class in which you're now providing advanced training, if you will, it sounds like, to these filmmakers who have basic training and have this strong need and desire to tell African stories to Africans. So for me, what this brings up, and it kind of, it's social impact, it's entrepreneurialism, it's using the technology to build a business that, as Natasha says, serves needs-based, demands-based solutions. So we're creating markets here as well as trying to serve them in incredibly innovative ways. Innovative might not be even a good enough way to describe it, in ways that just hasn't been done yet. And so I think Natasha's question, are we creating enough entrepreneurship? And if I could add on to that, and are we scaling it? Are we scaling not just what we're trying to do, but are we scaling opportunities for others to do more? This becomes a very important question, which actually ties in nicely to the question I have for Chike on business model. You've used an increasingly popular approach of creating platforms that appeal to a particular demographic, growing usage, and then offering big brands the opportunity to engage with those users. For your two main platforms, I think the brand has been MTM. What are your views on this strategy at this point? And how does using one source of revenue affect your operations and your growth potential? Have you and your team, have you considered other models of revenue generation? If so, which ones? If not, why not? Finally, what do you think of a subscription-based model in African markets?
All right, thank you. Again, it goes back to defining something that is African-centric. You can actually cut and paste a model, a business, a revenue model, especially in the tech space. You can actually cut and paste a revenue model that's working here into whatever you're doing in Africa. Most likely, you're going to run into some problems. And for us, what we first spotted was that, look, there's a gap. Corporations cannot connect to young people because they don't understand digital. So we first and foremost developed a digital agency. Essentially, what the agency was doing was we're looking at passion points. So you look for passion points because it's easier to aggregate people within their passion points than to create something and then start pushing them to see if they can like it. So football is a passion point. That was our first stuff. So you don't talk football in Nigeria and Africa and then you want to go get people to come and be part of that. No. Even if you stand up in front of your street and say, up Chelsea, another person will just say, go and sit down. It's up Man U. So, so it's something that people connect at that level so easily. Even if I do it here, you find out that this one will divide into two. So we decided to go into that space in the first instance. So we built a football platform. And what happened was this. We built this in 2010, just about the time the World Cup was hosted in South Africa. And for us, it was fun because that was just when we were starting. When we built it, Cadbury, it's a UK company. Cadbury was actually the people that approached us because they felt that they couldn't get into the traditional media space. People like MTN, like Samsung, who are official partners and all that, they've all bought all the airtime and all the space. Okay, so they couldn't connect on traditional media. And here we are, just starting off, and they, came knocking. And the first thing they asked that we're ready. I was like, ready for what? so we're ready to hire you guys. We haven't fully set up the company. We're still building the platform. And that kind of created a small problem for us because if you type fastconnectonline.com now, it brings out the football platform. But that ought to be the corporate name of the company. But because they were moving us pretty fast and we couldn't even think, just incorporate this and then let's move on, get everything tied up. So we quickly set up to fit into their own time frame because they want it now. This exciting thing about that was that we started engaging people on World Cup 1 month before the World Cup. So long before the traditional media kicked in, we were already discussing World Cup, we were already engaging with young people. 2 months after the World Cup, we are still discussing online. And all the people that have worked on traditional media, they packed up and gone. So it turned out that they've leveraged the digital platform much more than those who actually invested in traditional media. At about that time, two things happened. Kraft, which is a US company, bought Cadbury. Okay? And then Cadbury was trying to figure out what would they do. Would they still continue with their campaigns? MTN, who invested heavily in traditional media that saw what happened, quickly came to us and said, look, is there a space? And we said, well, it was built for World Cup. The World Cup is over. And then we turned and asked ourselves, hang on, football is not over. Okay, it's actually Premiership as well. It's good for English Premiership and all that. They said they want to be part of that. So we quickly switched from World Cup into Premiership. And then guess what? MTN in their characteristic manner said, we want it exclusively. I said, okay, then you pay for it. They said, no, we'll pay. And that became a business for us. So when they paid us for that platform, we then realized that strategy of, connecting with young people digitally, using the passion points, and then kind of harness them into a community brands will definitely come. So that became more or less the template we've been adopting. We crack a joke in our system that says, look, it's like you're building a stadium. When you're building a stadium, there's nobody there. People don't come to see what's going on. The day the stadium is finished, and you introduce any sports inside that stadium, all manner of people start showing up. The day people start showing up in the stadium, corporations will show up. And that's why you start naming this stand after this corporation, and then that stand, and then let's say, what's the name of the corporation? Let's rename the whole stadium. So that's just the business and how it works. And we found out that for us in Africa, it's a continuous process. So when we moved into movies on Afrinole, for us it was a no-brainer. So when we instituted the short film competition, we knew we were trying to build an ecosystem. The truth is that when we set out the $100,000, it was our own money. By the time it was finished, all sorts of corporations were already coming in to partner with us to do the second edition. So the second edition that is running right now is not our money that we're using for that. So we found out that they naturally came in because they've seen something that's helping them to connect with young people. Having said that, we also need to be careful about what constitutes a revenue model. Now that we're at the point of talking to investors, it's something that gets thrown at me very often. What's your revenue model? And each time I go, why I'm going is because I'm trying to, first and foremost, frame what we are doing in such a way that it will make sense to you. Because more often than not, you are not actually part of what we're doing in Africa. So I'll say something, I'm just going to say stuff that fly over your head, and then you think that we're not actually doing anything. So I'll probably take first 30 seconds trying to understand clearly how to pitch it at you. Because if I show you that I'm doing stuff on an app, the first thing that is in your mind is advert revenue. We have not started on advert revenue. But right now, we make $1 million on non-adverts. It's difficult for me to explain this to people who will come and then bring their checklist, and the first thing they want to see is, what's your ad revenue? CPM or CPC? And those things don't yet exist inside our system. But it still doesn't stop us from creating a revenue model that perhaps tomorrow people can see and relate with as something that is peculiar to this ecosystem. You understand? Because it's actually a big ecosystem. It's a massive industry. But you need to connect in a manner that helps. And I'll give you an example. When we won the competition, the first advice that they gave us, up to the highest level of tech people we got in touch with as a result of winning the competition, was like, look, scale this up and then push ads. You can't scale up like that in Africa. Snapchat can scale up in US that fast. You can't scale up like that in Africa because we don't understand what an app is. A lot of people have their mobile devices, and they don't even understand that the BBM they are using to chat is an app. So you've got to go into some heavy investment in behavioral change before people could even begin to understand what exactly you're trying to talk about, not to talk of scaling up. And we knew that. So when they were telling us, don't scale up and run ads, we knew that we're going to die before we finish that, because we don't even have the capacity to do that amount of behavioral change. You need to work with big corporations. Instead, we switched our attention to say, okay, what are the big corporations working on the mobile ecosystem having a challenge? You have the phone manufacturers, like Samsung. So we approached Samsung, and we said, you know what? You're looking for local content. Here's one of the best local content from Africa. I'll tell you what, pre-install it, and don't pay us. So then they felt we were stupid. Good bargain. But for us, we're actually trying to solve a problem. So the moment Samsung pre-installed it and shipped it out there, Nokia saw it, and Nokia felt, look, why people didn't tell us about this? And we said, okay, no, it's okay. We've always had a relationship with Samsung, but if Nokia wants to get involved, you're going to do one thing for us. They said, what's that? Anywhere you have an outdoor, a billboard, putting down your new models of phones, normally they put the models of phones and they put Twitter and they put Facebook. We say add Afrinole as the logo. That's all we ask. And they thought, well, it's not a big deal. It's not costing us extra money. In any case, we're going to put the board. So they started doing that. When that happened, the telcos saw it. And for us, those are the people we are targeting. Because for telcos, that's data revenue. If you notice, average revenue per user on calls is going down. So data revenue is the next revenue model for them. So you can't walk up straight to them and say, this is what we want to do. They won't listen to you. So we need to go through all that route to get their attention. And here comes MTN approaching us and say, hey, how you guys doing? We want to do stuff with you. And we say, okay, fine. Now that's the next challenge. Each time I try to tell that story, people feel that we are stupid. Oh, you should have gone for data revenue sharing. No telco in Africa will share data revenue with you, not yet. If you go into that, it's a deal breaker straight away. So we didn't even bother ourselves. We just simply said, you know what? You guys are big, we are small. Just let's do a sponsorship deal. Pay us X amount of money, and then you go have your data. For them, it's a quick win. But for us, it's a way of growing. But then we insisted, if you pay us that sponsorship deal, you must undertake the marketing of the app across the operating countries. So rather than us spending money on marketing the app, TV, radio, they became the one doing that. And that's how it became a household name. And that's how the app grew. As the app is growing, and because it's us, we are now changing the equation. So when they came to us and said, we've done Nigeria successfully, we want to do 16 operating countries in Africa, we say, no, we're not going to do it the way we did it before. We're going to change some things now, and you're going to get a lot more involved, because now we have a better bargaining power. That's how you grow this in Africa in terms of business model. And it's kind of story I can tell here. I don't know if investors will be patient to listen to this, because it's not a textbook model. Well, collectively we can work on this, and then tomorrow they will see it and everybody will like it. And then, because in the end, a business is about making money, let's be honest. It's not about satisfying a particular model. You can do a nice model and it crashes. So I'll leave it there for now. Thanks.
Thank you, GK. And I think this brings up some very interesting issues around what is required to change behavior as these new technologies are implemented, as new businesses are created around them. And for me, I said this earlier, it's not just behavior. I think it's also culture, it's history. There are legacies here. And it takes time, and it takes a very sensitive and sophisticated knowledge of how things work on a very on the ground level. I think this presents us a nice transition to Natasha, who's going to talk to us about another innovative project and a little bit about talent, the need for talent, opportunities and challenges around talent in these areas. And just so we know, our time is starting, unfortunately, to get already a little tighter. So Natasha, IBM recently opened its Africa Research Lab in Nairobi to focus on developing commercially viable technologies that can have an immediate impact. IBM has indicated that it plans to do this in partnership with local institutions and local entrepreneurs. Can you tell us a bit more about this lab, for those who might not know about it yet, generally, and then maybe discuss the role of talent and its development, both in terms of opportunities and challenges in mobile technology on the continent?
Sure. So I have a challenge because I'm long-winded, but due to time constraints, I'm going to try and keep this short.
You guys have done very well. It's a rich, exciting area.
So, we've got 12 research labs globally, and Nairobi is the 12th lab, and we are very, very, very proud and excited about it. It's had a successful launch. It's a collaboration between government and IBM. IBM's big on research, as you know. We spend about $6 billion annually on research across the globe. And we have 3,000 scientists on our team globally on different research projects. Now, I think what is fascinating for me about how the labs work is that even though we may be facing a challenge that we're wanting to address, for example, in Cape Town, and it's pretty much the way that IBM works across globally, is that we will leverage the knowledge and the talent and the know-how that we have across all of the labs globally in order to come together with a particular solution for that region. Also, all of the labs have access to our fabulous Watson, which is absolutely phenomenal and really has also quite a big role to play in Africa in terms of linguistics and illiteracy as well. So the Nairobi Research Facility is a crucial step in terms of leveraging intellectual property and research with our local capability and skills to enable institutions and entrepreneurs to thrive in the context of Africa. And I say context of Africa because you have to have local adaptation in order to succeed. So I think that would address Morton's question about the lab. In terms of talent, boy, that's really an exciting topic, and I hope I had more time, to talk about it. And we were talking about it quite a lot. And earlier on, Michael was asking me, so what is the IBM Africa story? Because I've spent the last week at our headquarters in Armonk and visiting NYC and Somers and really telling all of my IBM US colleagues about the Africa story. And I think right now the IBM story in Africa is pretty much the same story with all internationals, and that's the skills shortages that we face. And it's one of the barriers that we have in terms of the ICT industry in Africa. It's definitely a crucial part of getting us the GDP growth that we want to see in Africa. And yet, those are one of the capability barriers that we face. Now, in South Africa alone, we have a shortage of some 70,000 ICT professionals. Okay, so there is a huge demand. The government clearly knows that ICT has got a big role to play in GDP, but we just do not have the skills currently in the market of experienced professionals in order to support this demand and achieve what we want to achieve. And that's further exacerbated by the fact that we are not getting the number of people graduating from universities to kind of alleviate some of that pressure we are seeing, at least into the medium and the long term. South Africa's graduation rate sits at, 12.5%. The international average is 25%. So we are not getting the number of students coming through from the ICT sector. And we have got problems in terms of our education system. There was recently a World Economic Forum survey done where 143 countries were surveyed, and South Africa was last in the world for maths and science and third last in terms of education. So we have a lot to do in terms of skills. It is a big challenge for us. I think the numbers I've explained to you explain the extent of the challenge, and that it is definitely a very real problem. And so because of the interest in Africa and all of the local organizations, all of the entrepreneurs, all of the international investors coming in, fishing in the same pool of experienced professionals who are ICTs, we find that there literally is a war on talent, and that is no exaggeration. I'm in the battlefield every day, I do know. And so we're finding that we have to explore different avenues in terms of bringing talent, and that's one of the reasons why I'm here this weekend. And it's part of a program that we called Diaspora, where we're really wanting to bring Africans who are studying in Europe, in the US, in the UK, back to Africa. It's one of the strategies that we're employing in terms of alleviating this skills challenge that we are facing. The other thing is that we've got really, really great graduate programs so that we can actually work with the students that we have in the African markets, bring them on board, give them the ICT skills that they actually need so that they are more relevant in terms of work skills and contributing to the challenges we face in the technology sector. And we've also formed partnerships with associations called, for example, African Leadership Academy. I don't know if anybody's heard of them, but they really house students across Africa, giving them leadership skills, send them over to the US for an undergraduate degree, and then hopefully an agreement is made between the two parties that within 10 years of graduating, they come back to Africa to give back to the continent. So those are some of the things that IBM is doing, because we definitely see this as a challenge. But we are optimistic that with all of the strategies we are employing, we can help. I do think that the ICT sector in Africa as a whole, though, could form more of a partnership in really tackling this challenge a lot more aggressively. The engineering fraternity seems to have got on board. They seem to be grabbing more of the maths and science students than the ICT sector is. So I think we've got some catching up to do, and there's more work to be done. But it is a challenge, and we are on the right path.
Thank you so much. We have about 15 minutes for questions. Are there any out there? Okay, so we'll get as many in as we can. I'm going to ask you also to balance your depth with your brevity. I'll start in the back and then come down When you, yes, the young lady on the far left, can you just stand up and tell us like who you are and where you're from maybe before you ask your question?
Sure. Hi everyone, my name is Emily Harris from the Yale School of Management. And my question is continuing our discussion on kind of double bottom line between social impact and return on investment when it comes to mobile technology. I think one of the sectors where mobile technology has really had a lot of impact in the last decade is in health, with health, apps, and technology. And so I'm wondering if anybody can actually speak to kind of how this double bottom line is going to move forward within the health sector. I think a lot of times these apps initially just have that social impact connecting doctors and patients, but how the bottom line can really come in from an investment perspective.
Well, so I think we've got several examples, upcoming examples of startups kind of tackling both issues in the health area. A company that comes to mind in particular, Medic Mobile, spinoff from Frontline SMS, which is a great example of a company that is kind of a hybrid for-profit, non-profit in their strategy. And application, it's hybrid, utilitarian, and social impact for its users. So I think it's a growing need for more companies like that. In Uganda, Africa funded a tech hub there called Hyperco Lab. And one of the things that we're working on now is an incubation hub specifically for health technologies. Because one of the things that happens within that space in particular is you have all these silos of information and innovation and accomplishment. And that's, on one hand, good, but on the other hand, it's an incredible waste of time and talent for the people in the other silo to have to then duplicate all that effort so that the public can benefit from these applications and innovations in the health area. So what we're trying to do is to get many of these groups to convene in one space and kind of share knowledge and share time with each other so that things can happen in collective movements like you see in the tech space with things like the iHub and MESS and other things around the continent. So.
Sorry, if I may just chip in, because this is something that will keep coming up as far as you're talking about Africa. Social impact. One thing we have to always bear in mind is that in Africa, you can't have social impact without sustainability. So when you want to delve into social impact, it's actually a marathon, it's not a dash, it's not like a sprint. So because Africa by design, there's lots of poverty. So if you're going to work towards social impact, you need to plan for a long term. And oftentimes when people get seed funding for social impact related activities, they're actually for a short period of time. So you find out that after 1, 2, 3 years, they are already struggling, whereas they haven't even started solving the whole problem. I think going forward, we need to scale up and begin to get a lot more entrepreneurial, even when we are thinking about social impact. For instance, one of the things we're advising those who are working on medical things is to get close to pharmaceutical industries. Okay, let's see how to bring them in. They have vested interest as a business. They are for them it's something that can drive their profit. You can put in a small portion of that into what you're doing on an ongoing basis to maintain sustainability. But I think whenever we talk social impact in Africa, let's factor in sustainability upfront rather than thinking about it further down the line.
Yeah, I completely agree with that. Grants aren't bad, but they're not underscoring the fact that they need to be sustainable solutions with a revenue model behind it. I think there are some huge opportunities in the insurance space, in the big data space in healthcare, working with pharmaceutical companies. The company that was a recent exit for us was they took insurance claims and digitized them between hospitals and insurance companies, as well as created an electronic medical record system. And a lot of the most exciting opportunities that we were seeing down the track were working with the pharmaceutical companies. Big Pharma was very interested in what they could find out through our data system about the way that their drugs were being deployed. Insurance companies, I think there's a huge opportunity to use the proliferation of mobile to send messages to patients to make sure that they're following the doctor's orders, to make sure that they're taking that medication when they need to make sure that they're staying away from the foods that they need to. So there are huge opportunities, and I think the more that it can link to opportunities with big players that are willing to pay, the more sustainable those solutions will be.
And that was your first nest incubated company that's been bought out.
Exactly.
Plain here.
It's called Planting.
Yes, right down here in front, your name and where you're from.
Sure. My name is Juliana Taylor. I work for Accenture doing mainly working mainly with the private sector, federal clients, and the nonprofit sector with supply chain and strategy work. And my question is sort of going off of what Chike mentioned. Their strategy for sort of getting local buy-in was working with partners that had already established credibility within the market. So for smaller businesses like the ones that are grown through MEST, how do they establish that same level of credibility with a population that is largely offline, that is often suspicious of things that are online or tech-related? How do you sort of build that credibility to sort of build a following within the local market?
I think it's interesting. So it's building that credibility with sort of the big players. So the story that Chike was talking about is actually something that we're right in the middle of with one of our companies. You know, we've launched, we're building credibility in the market, we're building credibility with some of the big players, and then planning to go to the telcos and hopefully make some money. But in the local market, it's about creating products that make sense to them, and it's about kind of getting them into their hands, bringing them into the creation process. So that's why it's so important to be local, to be on the ground. As investors, we try to spend a lot of our time in Ghana, and our entrepreneurs are all very, very knowledgeable of the market. So it's about that market understanding and building solutions that are demanded and make sense.
Okay, since our time is getting very short, let's get a couple questions in and then they can respond as they like. So let's start here with you, Sir Anthony.
Thank you very much. Hello everyone, I'm Anthony Kagwara. So I'm currently a student at Swarthmore. I am a graduate of the African Leadership Academy, and I was part of the inaugural interns at the IBM research team, which was a great experience. And I have 3 questions. Very short.
Go ahead.
So the first question is, what's the balance between domestic and diaspora users for your missions?
For Chike.
For Chike?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And what's the is regulation a major hurdle in terms of scaling? Like, you can reach 300 million people here easily, but 40 million in Kenya, trying to scale to Rwanda, and they're like, we don't want our data stored in Kenya. So how does that affect scale? And should we partner with telcos for success? And finally, how is data as a service becoming more of a model? There's a data through telcos. What about data generated by applications?
Okay. Now, why don't you ask your question too?
Okay. My name is Olaide Shrek. I'm a mechanical engineer from NYIT, New York Institute of Technology. My question is geared towards the behavioral impact in Africa and more towards online payments and the future of digital currency in Africa.
Thank you. Go ahead, one more.
All right, good morning. My name is Lamine Adeosun. I'm from Karamo Capital. We're kind of a asset management shop. We've actually visited MEST in Accra. So my question was, you mentioned you had one exit. So I wanted to know, and obviously Chike, you have an app, you're an entrepreneur, so I obviously wanted to know about the ecosystem and how it evolves. We're seeing a lot of kind of incubators across the continent. Is there that next layer of capital, and how are your companies kind of finding that, or how are you finding raising capital, obviously? So that's my question.
Thank you. So we have 5 questions right there. We have 3 minutes, and we have 8 more.
I like that.
What time's the gala? Sorry. Please.
Okay. Let me start with his own question. In terms of users, we have more African users than diaspora. And that's the beautiful thing about our market. We're actually not pushing for the diaspora market. We're actually pushing for the African market. So and it's interesting because people think that those in Africa don't actually watch movies. They do on mobile devices. So we have more users in Africa than diaspora. That's one. In terms of data, when it comes to regulation and data, there are a couple of things people are interested in. For corporations, for instance, the telcos, their interest in data is purely on a revenue basis, okay? Because average revenue per user on calls is dropping. People are testing more than they are calling right now. When they started, people used to call a lot, and now people are testing more than they call. So average revenue per user is actually dropping, and then data consumption, either by watching movies or doing Facebook, whatever you're doing in your mobile device that's consuming data, that's a new revenue line for them. And anything that's going to drive that is usually what they promote. Now, when it comes to individual, as to things like privacy issues and stuff like that, again, our own app is quite different. Our app is just purely a utility app. So we don't deal with, in fact, I remember one of the requests lately to us was to see if we can store people's phone number, and we refused, because we didn't want to dabble into anything that will expose us to privacy issues. But other than that, in terms of content, watching movie, it's something that is, it's like telling stories in Africa. It's something that we all grew up with it, whether it was in cinema, on TV, and now on the mobile device, it's just something people are used to doing. Maybe I'll quickly chip in terms of raising fund. That topic is a full day's topic, actually, if we're going to go into that, because oftentimes my experience does not correlate with some of the things I hear out there. And when I hear, even in the previous panel, and I hear people talking about investment in Africa, there's money out there and all that. It's not that true. You've got to be careful because it depends on what you're looking for. For us, we're in a situation where we bootstrapped for 18 months, we built it up to a point. So we're not looking for $50,000, we're not looking for $1 million, we're not even looking for $2 million, okay? Because we can generate that. However, you now ask people to say, okay, how do we scale this up? We need investment. And I started hearing things like, well, you see, the market is a bit divided. There are very few players playing between the 3 million to 6 million boundary. There are more players between 10 million and 20 million. And I'm sitting there asking myself, I don't need $10 million. What we want to build can be built with $5 million. So telling me that, okay, we need to get to $10 million. How do we get to $10 million when we don't even have $5 million to get to where we need to get to? You understand? Those are some of the things there, and I like the kind of thing he's doing as an incubation, and we need more of such, because people need to be on ground, groom companies, work with them, because again, it makes the risk a lot more easier because people can understand what's involved and they can grow with it. We look forward to becoming an incubator in another 1 year or two because of our own peculiar experience. We need to set up fund and grow people collectively and mentor them to make things happen.
I think that's really interesting. So when we started in Ghana 6 years ago, there was definitely a need for a 2-year training program to create global world-class entrepreneurs. And now we're seeing the people outside of our incubator, the applicants that we're getting each year are better and better and better. And so I think that there's a critical mass now where maybe we can create a lighter scale training program or abbreviated training program. And we're starting to explore how can we invest in all of the great entrepreneurs outside of our own program, and how can we increase our footprint across the continent. So to answer your question, one thing that we're looking at is potentially setting up other locations around Africa to sort of get access to deal flow for us, but also to become a soft landing pad for our companies that are expanding across the continent. And then secondly, I think that, along with that, we're also seeing a need for follow-on capital, and that's something that, we're exploring ways to get involved in. And I know, John, you're very active in the angel space.
So we have thus far been kind of dabbling in the space. but most recently started working on a new angel fund, actually leveraging diaspora capital. So people like yourselves who go on to get great jobs at Accenture and other places, and who want to reinvest in the continent, but who can't move back. And I've heard that story over and over again. So we try to be a resource for those individuals to work with other individuals who have a similar experience and want to work with companies. And if I can answer this question real quick about data, there's 3 types of data that people often conflate. So you have content, so that's like your Facebook, your Twitter, all that kind of stuff. Then you actually have the packets of information that bring that to you. That's telco data, which Chike was just talking about. And then you have what's called metadata. So that lives somewhere between the two, and that tells you a lot about people's behavior. It tells you a lot about the content, and it tells you a lot about the channels which it's being delivered. And so when you ask your questions about privacy, there's kind of answers on each of those levels, and I'm happy to talk to you afterwards.
Yeah, and on that note, I think we need to close, but if we think of this as a beginning, an introduction rather than an end, the conversations can continue in the way that they do. With the panelists will be around at lunch and going on. In the meantime, I want to thank you all for your patience, your energy, your interest. Thank Awo again for helping put this together, and I hope you'll help me in thanking our panelists. It was really wonderful work today. Natasha, Chike,